There is a tremendous amount of focus right now looking at the world as a dysfunctional place, separation, anxiety, mental health issues, conflicts that are going on. And, and now neuroscientists like Ian McGill, Chris Gilboa, Taylor are pointing to the fact that, especially in the urban environment, the urban world is people are stuck in the left hemisphere of the brain, where the left hemisphere of the brain operates based, motivated by fear, to get things done at any cost, is self-righteous, it gets angry. So most of us are apparently stuck or trapped in the left hemisphere of the brain. So that lends us to also behave in certain ways, to be self-righteous and be stuck in dogma and I am right, you're wrong kind of narrative that's pervading all over the, especially the urban world around the world, right? So now psychologists and scientists and researchers are focusing on some of the root causes of why this may be true. Because if we can transcend the left and get to the right brain and become whole brain, the right brain is about truth, beauty, and goodness. It's about trust in the universe, putting things in context and perspective. We'll have a much more peaceful, much less stressful environment, is what is being said. So the root cause is going back to then the birth of a child. And and it is gone further back to the conception of that fetus and the prenatal and to the birth and the postnatal relationship between the mother and the child, and then the other caregivers and the family members. And if the mother is not there for whatever reason, the caregivers play the role that they play with this infant, and the emotional relationship and the bond that now they're saying is very crucial for that child to grow up to become a confident, assertive young person. So, or an older person rather. So this is interesting, because when we look back at the history of psychology, modern psychology, Sigmund Freud basically talked about the mother-child relationship as a transactional relationship based on survival mode, selfish needs, libido, and also he brought up this Oedipus complex, um, sort of the sexual need of the child. So all of these things, soon after he came out with this, another psychologist called Melanie Klein, she disputed that, and she, being a mother herself and a student of psychology, said that no, there is an emotional relationship between the child and the mother that has to be honored. And that then became further research by psychologists like Ronald Fairbairn, Donald Winnicott, um, Heinz Kohut, Ian Sooty. I invite you to check all of these people out individually, because it's really interesting to read how they evolved from the Kleinian discoveries, revelations about this relationship. And that inspired John Bowlby, who then became very prominent in the attachment theory. And he worked with a Canadian psychologist called Mary Ainsworth, did a tremendous amount of studies, and now it's undisputed at the fact that a nurtured child who's looked after well, and it goes back also now from the conception, the pregnancy period, the prenatal, all of that is so important for a mother to for that child to have become confident and have good mental health and well-being and all of that as that child grows to an adult. So when we look at the current scenario, so the Western medical model has mechanized the birthing process more and more, bringing in technology, separating the mother and the baby, and then moved away from the natural processes. However, we know that the Western technology and medical model has reduced the infant mortality rate, reduced the mother and child mortality rate together. So all of those benefits are there. But now what we are seeing is perhaps we have gone a little too far away from nature by separating the mother and child, that is creating this separation anxiety as these children grow up to be adults. So how do we address this? So there is even more work done by people like Gabo Mate, who himself suffered from separation anxiety when his mother fled the Nazi invasion of Hungary, for instance, and how that impacted his life. And he's written this book called The Myth of Normal with Daniel Mate, who clearly goes back to show through the research that they themselves have done and then sourcing other research too, that the conception, the prenatal and the postnatal process, we have to have a good mix of, yes, technology is important now, but go back to nature, the natural processes, and giving the power and agency back to the mother to make the decisions on her own. So then there is less trauma for her in the process too, with having this agency that she has for her own birthing process. And that also then brings out, he also brings out the importance of midwifery. We have given up on midwives in the Western world, and we know that is a huge loss, and it's now coming back, luckily for us. So how do we find that balance between these different ways, and bringing a much better outcome for the future, because everything is interconnected, right? So when I also do my own research. Now, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an expert, but I've had a great interest because of my mindfulness work and emotional intelligence, self-awareness work that I've done, and the amount of research I've done, even into the organizational leadership space. I take deep dives into studying psychology and these kinds of books. And this book is called Empathic Civilization: The Race to Global Consciousness in a World in Crisis by Jeremy Rifkin. Fantastic book, really, really interesting book to take a deep dive into our evolutionary biology too. So what's he and others also have now said is coming out now in the mainstream is that 200,000 years ago, if not for love, compassion, empathy, and altruism, we will not be here as a human race. So just think about also the process of two human beings coming together in a fusion to become vulnerable to each other to conceive a child. The miracle of birth is conceived by a fusion, right? So if from then on we do everything to separate the mother and the infant because of technology and because of not understanding our oneness with nature, we are creating a problem, right? So that's what we are addressing here. And I know also from my personal experience of having been a child myself, two parents who were both teachers. They were very compassionate human beings. They were my mother was a Montessori school teacher. So that experience of that childhood for me, and I grew up in a village called LalithAnanda in the hill town of Kandy, and having that community for us to grow up in the safety of that community, have that psychological safety, and that's what's so important for us, you know, as we grow up. So I am also a parent, and I know I'm fortunate that Samantha has studied child psychology, is also a Montessori school teacher. But what was most apparent for me is that there was a natural instinct in the way when she was a mother, in the way her reaction, her responses with an emotional relationship with our children. So I come with that personal experience too, to see to this space to really talk about this with a little bit of authority on this too, from having that experience. But I want to read a passage from this book by Jeremy Rifkin on some work done by Tim Kaiser. He has done a lot of work, research into the area of the mother-child relationship or the caregiver-child relationship. He goes on to say, if a parent is warm, affectionate, responsive, and able to nurture an infant and balance his or her needs for both security and self-expression, the child will likely develop trusting relationships and will have confidence to develop his or her own selfhood. If, however, the principal caretaker is cold, arbitrary, in her or his affections, punitive responses, and anxiousness, and the child will be far less likely to establish a secure emotional attachment and self-confidence necessary to create a strong, independent co-identity. Right? These children invariably show a greater tendency to fix on material success, fame, and image as a solution, as a substitute mode for gaining recognition, acceptance, and a sense of belonging. Needless to say, the Go Global advertising and the marketing phalanx preys on these emotional insecurities by promising the greater wealth, more possessions, and improved status and social standing will buy the affection, warmth, and acceptance they so desperately sought. And he goes on to say that finding people who exhibit strong materialist values are less likely to develop intimate personal relationships, are less tolerant of others, and care less about the welfare of fellows. In other words, far less empathetic. So, in a world where we need empathy, we need a moral compass where we are out there, we have to live with fellow human beings and fellow sentient beings, and acknowledging our oneness with nature. What do we do with all this information? We have to then think about, okay, creating awareness. So the reason I'm doing this is to create some awareness about this, but I invite you to do your own research. Don't take my word for it. About the importance of this foundational relationship, and educating, especially the younger generation, of the importance of that. But there is also another implication here because of the modern techno-industrial societies, so stressful, needing both parents to work, and all of those stresses that then create additional issues of the inability to pay attention to the children. So what can we do as a society? What can economists do, policymakers do to make sure and value that inception, the conception to the prenatal, to the postnatal development of the child? Just like if you go to indigenous communities in, say, the rainforests of Asia or rainforests of South America, or in Africa, you still see the sacred process of conception is a part of a ritual, and then prenatal and the postnatal and the rite of passage until that child grows up to be a teenager gets, there's a ritual of that rite of passage that is still adhered to, and there are positive outcomes from that. So you combine that with modern technology, then we can, I believe, have a winning formula to create a much better world out there. So just to provoke thought, and I wish you all the very best for 2025, and be well, be happy.